We're going live, Tony, now. Hi, Tony. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Isa. Sorry, my audio was off.
Good to go then. Over the past 3 decades, so many books have been published on how to be successful and finding your purpose. Yes, we still grapple with this concept. My name is Isasipin Gosimdingi, and today I'm your host here at the Wesley Girls Essay, talking about something that is so complex, yet is made to be so simple on a day-to-day basis on different books. People just say, find your purpose. When are you getting successful? And all this concept, and we find ourselves difficult spot when we don't find those. And today we're having this amazing conversation with Brother Hloni Lepele, which is, I simply call him Sony. And today I'll call him Sony to have this conversation, success and purpose, the unconvicted killers, silent killers of our youth. Brother Hloni, thank you very much for joining us today. From the bottom of my heart, with the Wesley Guild, thank you very much for taking your time to join us today. Please greet our home and we can start with that conversation.
Thank you, Isa. Firstly, obviously, thank you so much for the invitation. Always nice just sharing on the platform, because one also gets to learn in the process. And greetings to everyone that is joining us. Looking forward to the conversation, the questions, the contributions. If anything, I hope that this will be a shared conversation that by no means will be concluded by this particular session, but will be continued going further.
Thank you very much. And we'll just dive in because we're looking at time on our side. But also at the same time, with everyone at home, you can comment, share your questions on the Wesley Guild Essay page, and we can all just engage on this topic. And I'm so happy that we are finally back into having the conversation as the Wesley Guild Essay, and once again, connecting as young people across the country and across the connection. Today we're talking about something that is that man has shaped the ground for young people, success and purpose. And I just want you, in your own understanding, to just define what is success versus to what it has become. And also what is purpose, what it has become. Because in my own view, I think in those two paradigms, it has become a different thing altogether.
Isa. So I think I'm going to keep my definition very simple. You know, one thing I'm starting to learn how to appreciate is the idea of accessible truths, accessible statements, accessible gospel for the benefit of this particular conversation. So purpose, simply defined, is your reason for existing. You know, why do you breathe? I remember recently there was a status I shared. I think you even commented when I was saying the very idea of breathing is a protest for life. You know, so the idea of just existing, of breathing, why do you insist on being alive every day? If in all creation, creation exists harmoniously, what is your contribution to this harmonious dance between creation, between humanity? And I always look at the idea of purpose. Like, one thing that fascinates me, for example, is going to funerals, not because someone has passed on, but because particularly our funerals as the Black community, one of the things you witness in a funeral is how people tap into their purpose in different ways. So in a funeral, you find someone, that person who just has a heart for caring and looking after people. That's what they'd be doing. You find that person who has a heart for making things happen, the practical aspect of life, that's what they would be doing. So that's a typical example, of how we get to tap into our purpose. And honestly speaking, success is something that can be defined by the goals that we set for ourselves. For one person, success is the ability to earn, to attain their PhD, 99, able to become a manager. That means that's based, so it's something that you define for yourself, something that's defined by a community, something that's defined by culture, but it's not always necessarily purpose. However, it can be purpose if you align the two. But the mistake that we often make is that the two is automatically one, a theme that I think we will tap into in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think I love the closing you're making on how we have actually, there's always this idea that if you find your purpose, then you will automatically be successful. Or if
Sure.
you then have found your purpose.
Sure.
Like you say, those two don't necessarily go together. And as on this conversation, as you were, what you're saying about the standard of society, especially around success and around also people, I want you to look at the commodification of success. You look at the numbers of books that are being published on how to be successful, habits, and all of those things. And how is that influencing the anxiety around young people around the 20 to 30 years or 20 to 35 years when they cannot meet these standards in these books, and when they cannot find their purpose after all reading these books, and they find themselves stuck and not knowing what their purpose is?
Sure. So one of the things we need to do is in understanding how it has impacted young people's mental health and why it can be problematic is we need to expose this concept for what it is. So now, the first thing we need to acknowledge is that the idea of, because often success is defined by the idea of successfully becoming an adult. That is, successfully individualizing. So often when we speak about success, we speak about someone who's been able to move out of their place, someone who's able to get their own place, get their beautiful mansion, get their own car, and have a family, get a good paying job. And so they have successfully individualized. And those who have not been able to do this are then viewed as unsuccessful, and they themselves view themselves as unsuccessful, which is a very problematic concept, because the reality where I will start is that, Isa, you and I right now could both earn the same paycheck. You and I could work at the same place. You and I could take the same gross income home every month. But there are other situations, there are other factors rather, that will determine our ability to get the social markers that people use to determine, or rather to define or to establish whether one is successful or not. A typical example is that you could work, and you and I could earn the same salary, but you could have a bigger or rather larger amount to contribute to home. Now, suddenly, even though you've got a good job, even though you've studied, even though you've been able to get yourself into a very good paying company, a good paying role, you are not viewed as successful. So that just shows you, it's an example of how flawed this concept is. Now, in order to understand how we get here, we need to appreciate the fact that, firstly, the idea of adolescence, which is when many of us work on whether we'll be successful or not, is a cultural phenomena. Can you hear me? Isa, can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to continue with the assumption that you can still hear me. So I'm saying the idea of adolescence is a cultural phenomenon. Humanity does not inherently have this phase in life where you have to go to school and you have to work hard so that you can one day become successful in keeping with the standards that have been set by society. It is a phenomenon that is born in the Industrial Revolution, and before that, humans would naturally progress to pick up on their family trade. Some would become apprentices. It would look different in different societies. And so, for instance, when you had cows, you would then take on the trade. You would then take over your father's farm. Whatever your father's trade was, you would take on that. And so when the Industrial Revolution happens and it disrupts the system of bartering in South Africa, colonialism disrupts all of this. Suddenly people have to go to the cities, have to work. And suddenly, in order to get a better job, what is now the determining factor would be your education levels. And then suddenly there are new things in society. Now, with all of this, what then happens is we then no longer have an immediate transition from childhood to adulthood. But now you need what we call social markers and symbols that will determine when you are accepted or culturally accepted as an adult. Then these becomes acquiring a wife, getting a job so that you can pay lobola, and so forth and so forth. Now, what this then does, it means that we then have this new phenomena which has then been recently coined, particularly to speak into African stages of youth, which is called waithood. When you are old enough to have a wife, you are old enough to move out of your parents' place, you are old enough to begin a life and to be culturally accepted as an adult. And at times, not only are you old enough, you are well within what would normally be accepted ages of an adult. You are in your 36, 37-year-old. However, you have not been able to individualize. Now, what this then does, it then says to you, it puts you in this confusion that you are an adult according to your age. You should have a wife, and you're probably in love with someone, and the church is demonizing that relationship because you are sleeping together outside of marriage, you are cohabitating, simply because you have not been able to attain the social markers of what society has come to culturally accept as the roots and the symbols of adulthood. And so therefore, you're an adult, but you're not an adult. And so you are stuck in this awkward phase. And therefore, whenever people continue to define success using these rooters, these symbols, these markers, a job, a car, a mansion, your own finances, you fall into a state of depression, because even though you know that that's where you should be, your circumstances dictate otherwise. And for other people, even though they do work, unfortunately, the situation at home does not allow them to individualize so soon.
Yeah, Hloni, you touch on a lot of things around how society has perpetuated, firstly, this anxiety. And I think we could appreciate how social media has exacerbated the situation. I mean, there's the book on 5 a.m. something, waking up. There's the 3 a.m. gang. There's
Sure.
there's multiple incomes. So there's all these things that are pushing everyone to say, if you don't do those things, then
Sure.
you will. But I then think about what you spoke on success, on being more, I could say more, also being content about your life choices and where you are as a person, and also looking at how you have progressed. It might not be financially, but it may be in many other things. Over the weekend, I met someone who's a cyclist and has been a cyclist for a very long time. And his friends have obviously made it to the corporate ladder. They have had businesses that have bloomed over time. But he's still sticking to the culture of cycling because he understands what it means for different people. And actually, he's in the process of writing a book on it. And it has taken him this long. But he's so happy about it. And he defines that as his own success and his own way. But he does not have the material possession. He does not have all these other things. He's living his simplest life. And when I asked him, are you content? And he said, I am content with my life. And you look now going back on the commodification and how then society defines success and also defines purpose. How does then that influence our careers? Are we choosing our careers based on what would have been our purpose? Or are we choosing careers based on what would seem to be successful in society?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. I will give a free we'll call it a prophecy, within the tent ministry context of things. A part of me looks forward to a season of a broke Methodist church because I think it will surf out people who are potentially attracted to the ministry by the idea of just having this medical aid that comes in, even if your church is operating or not. So the reality is that finances can inform how we go on to, or how we are attracted to certain vocations. Finances can inform the careers that we take. And firstly, let me say there is nothing wrong with that. The reality is that a lot of us come from families that still need that financial contribution. I often say the reason you're not going to see a lot of young people going for vocations that they would have went for had they grown up in a first world country is simply because finances play a crucial role in our well-being. That is a reality. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And so now, having said that, what we need to work around is learning how to express our purpose no matter where we find ourselves. Now, an example of this is, let us consider civil workers. My mom is a teacher, and her and I often reflect about what they call in their career the Fundiluchaba generation of teachers. A lot of them came in. There are those who came in because they love teaching, but there are those whose impatience with children tell you that perhaps these people aren't so passionate about early childhood development. They're not passionate about teaching students. But the question then is, how do they express their purpose within the context of teaching? Because the reality is that was the skill need in South Africa at a particular moment. And I think it actually still is. We cannot completely demonize the idea of people going into particular careers simply because it is more financed. But what we can do is say, how do we creatively explore the idea of exposing, or rather expressing your purpose regardless of where you find yourself? What this could look like, for instance, is saying, here's someone who is brilliant in numbers. They are a teacher, but you can see that their heart is not in the classroom. Can this person then not contribute to the financial well-being of our educational institutions? Can that person not forge a career within education to make sure that they find themselves at a space where they can use their desire, or rather they can use their purpose to contribute meaningfully. Now, there is a beautiful expression that helps us around this that comes from an old course called the Network Course. It says our passion tells us our where, and our skill tells us our how. Now, our passion, so my passion, I might be passionate about education, but I might not have the skill to teach children. My skill might be more around the organizational stuff of things. So my passion will tell me to be in education, and my how then would tell me how I express this. Maybe then I'm going to organize schools to operate better. I'm going to organize schools to organize themselves better. Then it means I might end up working as a district officer or something like that. But also in a developing country, I think we owe it to ourselves to say, wherever you find yourself, also manage within, or rather operate within your how. Because the reality is, I would want to sit here, Isa, and perhaps they Ken Costa, who's in a first world country, and say, people must not dare go to careers where they are not aligned. But the reality of the Black child in particular is that we look for any space. But then what I would then say is, once you are in that space, once you've managed to find your foot in a particular industry, forge for yourself a career that will allow you to operate within your how. But then having said that, there are those careers that you cannot take chances around that will just frustrate you. For instance, ministry, and I would even say stuff like being a doctor. There's no ways you can try to forge a career. You need to find yourself as soon as possible. And if you feel that you are not called, that is the first thing. And then lastly, just around this, in terms of just keeping it lighthearted and not going deep into stuff, is really also saying, once you found yourself, I've got friends who have, I know a friend who I've got the utmost respect for, who was a teacher, and they found themselves as a teacher, and they were like, this is not for me. They use those at the time to actually plan towards their desired career. I know I've got someone who I look up to, who was a minister at a very important time, and they just felt that their call matured, and they now operate within the interfaith space. They did not feel that, they felt as though this was constraining them, and they had to betray their convictions. And so in as much as we are also forging our how, we must not betray our convictions. And that is my response to you. Within a first world country, it is easy to find yourself within a career that is well aligned with who you are. But in a world where we are still trying to find ourselves, it is very difficult. And so perhaps in closing up around this particular question, I want to make an example with there's a beautiful pericope in the Bible of the Israelites when they find themselves in Babylon. And there are those who are saying, it's that beautiful scripture that we all like, Jeremiah, what's it, 31:11, I think it is. I hope my dean is not watching, because this is very exposing of my scripture, knowledge of scripture. But there's a beautiful passage, for I know the plans that I have for you, the plans to prosper you, plans to prosper you, and get to, and yeah, something like that. But anyways, I know the plans for you. And in that scripture, what happens is that there are prophets who say, God is going to free the Hebrews. God is going to free the Jews. Say from Babylon. He will free them as soon as yesterday. They need not worry. God will take them out of this horrible land, Babylon. And so their life is going to be good. But Jeremiah comes in that context to say, that is false. You guys are going to live in Babylon. You're going to be here for a long time, build houses, marry, have your children, and grow your nation, and because and work for the prosperity of this nation, because if it prospers, you guys will prosper. But ultimately, God is saying, you guys are going to have to make do, you're going to have to thrive where you are right now. And the truth is, at times we find ourselves in lines of work that are not ideal for what we have discerned to be our purpose. And how our God is not one who is limited to a particular context. You might feel that you could have done better as someone who owns their company, but your circumstances just do not allow for you to invest into running your own company yet. You can use those skills where you are right now. Our God is one who enables our prosperity regardless of where we are. A God who enables prosperity for the Israelites in Babylon surely can enable prosperity for a young person who finds himself within the education sector, and yet they feel that I just cannot teach children. There is a sense in which God will help them thrive even within the church. And yet they do not have a call to word and sacrament. There is no need for them to feel as though they need to leave the church because the church has said you do not have this call. But the truth is, they still can operate even within the organization of the church. They can operate within the office, in an administrative capacity. Our God is one who can use us regardless of where we find ourselves. And yeah, are you back with us, Isa?
Thank you very much, Tony, for keeping that going. Network in South Africa will always be an issue, but I'm back. Thank you very much for that. And you highlight something, because I'm in the education sector, it's something that we always frustrated about with people, maybe me included, changing and joining the education sector later on after maybe their first degree. And it's always the question of their passion. Can they teach these children? But you mentioned something that is so profound for me, that we can always work around our purpose in wherever we are. And I do believe that one way or another, we end up where we're supposed to be at the end of the day, which makes me want to question you that, are we supposed to find our purpose that is defined or definite in its nature? Or is purpose a day-to-day practice where you wake up every day and say, my purpose today is to come to Wesley Good Life, have this conversation, but that's a different purpose tomorrow. And which is where I come with the whole commodification of purpose around our society, where it's a red race for all of us to find our purpose, and we get frustrated if we don't find it within our 20s. Is purpose something that you need to figure out, or is it something that we can even figure out?
I think it can be both. Two terms is hupidisana. So hupidisana, the idea of me saying, Ati and I will mutually enable life to one another, when I wake up every day and I say Kiko Pidisana le batho who are around me, and Kiko Pidisana le diphoofolo, Kiko Pidisana le tlhaho at large, what I'm saying is that by my very breath, I'm going to go into the state of harmonious living with everything around me. So yes, there is a sense in which I can wake up and I can see, what is my purpose today? But we need to be cautious of a passive way of being. We need to be cautious of a passive way of life. A passive way of life is one where I just wake up and I am just waiting for everything to fall into place in order for me to live with everyone around me. And unfortunately, that can end up becoming a futile exercise. There are those areas of life, or rather, there are those things that are meant to trigger a special purpose, where I'm like, listen, this is Hloni. This task requires lihlohonolo. So one, there is a sense in which I wake up and I find how I can live, and that is an expression of purpose. But there are those distinct things that I'm like, these lihlohonolo has been called to, and I will work towards accomplishing that particular task. I will work towards contributing in society in this particular way. I will work towards improving society in a particular way. So yes, purpose is discovered in our everyday way of being. I think God created us, our very pulse, our very aliveness. Everyone has been created with a common purpose. There is nothing special about purpose in that sense, but everyone also has a distinct assignment that God continues to reveal to us. But I don't think we are predestined to a particular assignment. I do think our assignment is something we realize within the context of our life. As we breathe, we discover how we've been called to contribute in a special way.
Thank you very much, Tony. You remind me of a quote that came to stage one time I was being interviewed, and the interviewer was asking me about work and what, I don't know what was the question, but my was, we are not called to be leaders, but circumstances call us to be. We respond to circumstances. What happens today may be different tomorrow, and each and every day I could be passionate about teenage pregnancy, but tomorrow I'm passionate about climate change because of how it has affected me. Hence, the idea of purpose can always, to an extent, be refined. Also by the age we're in. I think it also would influence the things you care about at that time, which is also what's going to come. And I like the point you're making that purpose is not something that people can think of as predestined, that this is it. And I think with books that we're reading, they're taking us into an understanding. There's a predestined purpose that you need to fulfill. And we then don't feel that, and we don't feel these things that they're talking about. And then we then don't believe that we have found our purpose, only to find out every day of your life, you've actually lived your purpose. I'm gonna go to a comment that is a question, but I wanted to ask, most of the time we choose our when we're 18, 19, we just went out of high school and all of that. Do you think that's a good time to actually make this decision? Because I'm asking, because it's not often that we know ourselves at that age. And I think working towards your 30s and going upward, that's where you begin, if you're an intentional person, begin to have those questions. What makes me tick as a, what do I love? What do I what is that I'm passionate about? Now you are then, by that time, you already have maybe progressed to your PhD. When you start making those conscious, so is choosing careers and all those things that will define your success in terms of life and purpose.
I don't know if you can hear me, but you are lagging on my end. Hey,
can you hear me now? Hi, Fanny. I can hear you on my side. Hi, Fanny. If I switch off my video call, my video, can you still struggle with my audio? I'm sorry, we have just lost Trini. I'll do a quick check up on him. I'm sure he's struggling with network in this network in this country. I'm sorry he got disconnected a bit. We're trying to reconnect him. We apologize for that.
okay, I am back. Sorry, I missed you there, Isa.
Okay. So I was saying, we are in our 18, 19, 17. I was 17 when I needed to choose my career. And I look back and I'm like, I'm not sure I was even mentally fit to make, seeing that that's the time we're supposed to make this decision. how best can we equip young people to be able to make those decisions around their careers, which is maybe they're informed by their purpose, their passions, and all of that. Because at the end of the day, I found out when I was late in my 25 as to what actually makes me tick as a person. By that time, I had already even completed my master's. And obviously now I can't go back. I can't go back. So the whole idea around choosing your path and what you have, that what is your purpose when you don't even understand who you are as a person. Today I had a tutorial of second years and I asked them, can you tell me who you are outside of the degree and everything else? Who is this person in front of me? And they struggled with that question. And they've already chosen that they believe is their purpose or it's aligned to who they're supposed to be.
Look, I think, firstly, for me, this is where Christian teenagers should have an advantage. So I'd often say, I spent a lot of time as a youth pastor, in the last 10 years as a youth pastor. And one of the things I used to love saying to our teenagers was, if you had a car right now, this beautiful model, it's a Bentley, and it breaks down, it doesn't start in the morning for some odd reason, you are confused. Who are you going to take it to? They would give me various answers. But one thing that was certain is that they're not going to take it to a street side mechanic. With all due respect, nothing against the hustle. But for the benefit of this conversation, this metaphor rather, they wouldn't take it to a street side mechanic. They would rather take it to the actual manufacturers of this particular vehicle, because it is expensive. They want to find out what's wrong with it. And so one of the beautiful thing about being a Christian is there is a sense of consciousness about who created you. And therefore, it is easy to tap into the why have I been created behind creation. So that's where Christians should have a distinct advantage going into the world. One of the things that there are 5 characteristics that there's almost a global consensus based on research in ministry to youth that we have, that the marks of a resilient disciple amongst teenagers and young adults, that is the ages 15 to 34 in particular, amongst them is what we call vocational discernment. The ability to discover, to say, why on earth am I here? If you want to play around with it, we would say the ability to say, after we've had communion on a Sunday, how do I continue this experience in other pockets of society and make sure that the grace that I've encountered, other people encounter it? For your time already battling with this question, wrestling with this question. And so that already gets you into, thinking about what is my purpose, firstly. That's what church should be offering us. Your question directly is that exposure seems to be a huge enabler or equiper around one discovering and expressing their purpose. One discovering what is it what on earth am I here for? What is it that I one day want to do? The reason I say this so confidently is that the group of teenagers that I've been able to work with over the last couple of years, especially more recently, particularly the late Gen Zs, those who are born around 1999, 2000, 2004, actually, to evolution and exposure through social media. These kids seem to have an idea of what is it that they want to do. Some of them are even starting their own businesses. Some of them are already working towards their careers. I just had the privilege of seeing a young person who I saw from grade 10 literally launch his career and is now in Australia, has studied aviation, And from a very early stage, we knew that this is what he wanted. He knew that he wanted to lead a huge worship team. And he's right now in one of our prominent churches as far as the worship industry is concerned, and that is Hillsong in Australia. You could chart his career, but the reality I'm speaking about, the reality that we cannot disable as far as this is concerned. And so that is one thing young people today have. And so I want to then perhaps say, maybe if they more than ever, they are able to discover what it is that they want. Job market is now operating in who have studied for X, Y, and Z, working in BC career. And so that too also allows for flexibility for people who will discover their purpose later on. That is the second thing. But then thirdly, fourthly, is that I then want to say, listen, the truth is we are going to make mistakes as far as choosing careers early. There are those who will make mistakes, and there are those who will discover as to exactly what it is they want to do at a later stage. And there's nothing wrong with stopping then and saying, no, this is what I want to do. This is where I want my career to go. So then, having said that, is it too early? I don't think it's too early, especially for today's generation. For us, it might have been a bit too early. But for teenagers growing up today, it might not be too early. And that's why I personally recommend, where one can afford, gap years. Spend time and don't just study. If you've got a teenage daughter, allow them to go out with friends, allow them to be on social media, allow them to go see other things. Give them as much exposure as you can. Do not do not make these kids have a tunnel vision of saying, I just want to be a doctor one day, because that's going to be successful. And perhaps also when it comes to the commodifying of purpose, do not limit young people should not limit their vision of what they want to be today based on money, based on income. It must be broader than that. I accept and I understand that, as I said myself earlier today, that as Black families, we need to improve our economic status. But finances, income cannot be the only thing that determines what you will do tomorrow. Let us dream bigger. And so, Isa, I want to say, for us, it might have been too early, but based on what I'm seeing on research and based on what I've seen by observing teenagers today, I think exposure could help them set themselves up for success at a much earlier stage. And I would rather they start as soon as possible, knowing that it is okay to chart a new career. You're doing it, and you're doing it so brilliantly. And perhaps there's nothing wrong with that.
Thank you very much, Hloni, for that. I'll just make a comment, and then there's a question on Facebook. I'm looking at our time. I like the idea of mistakes. I like that over. You recently made a life-changing decision. I recently made a life-changing decision. I missed all the noise around the world. I decided to go back to school because what I'm pursuing now aligns with my current purpose. 5 years from now, when I'm done, it might be a different thing altogether, and I am not afraid to go back and start all over again. It's the freedom of choosing. I understand the but I think we should also find a way to liberate ourselves around that concept of, I know it's easier said than done. There's a lot of sacrifice, there's a lot of struggles person, but I think I'm more happier as a person. Again, the whole idea of mental health, it's a very important thing, because I think we're having young people dying by suicide. We have a lot of young people who have given up on life simply because they had to find themselves staying in jobs they no longer were happy with, simply because of the ideas of success and other ideas that are. But Yamza Mafongosi is, can we align success with purpose, or they go different ways? A reason I ask, they are both intertwined in societal expectation, and most time distorts the meaning and reality. Shoni, you hear me on that one? Hi, Shoni.
Sure, that's a beautiful question. Yes. No. Can we? Yes, we can. Firstly, is that one of the dangers that we often fall into as young people today? I'm counting down the years till I can say as young people, and so I'll be using that term as often as I can. But one of the classic mistakes we make, and I often look at it within the context of our own church, is that we allow institutions to determine what success is for us. Now, I come back to the issue of exposure. I often look with at times my heart breaks at how one's life goal seems to be confined around the church. When Hloni has not been exposed to any other thing apart from church, I go to church Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Obviously, what success will look like for me is I'm going to become a full-time Wesley Gilder. I will one day become a Mañano. I will one day join the local preachers. Whether I can preach or not, no, it's a letter that I'm for. Anytime they say no, eventually they will have to accept me. If not, I will try a different way of forging a career as a full-time courser. And it's sad because now what we've done, we've allowed institutions to determine for us what success is. We have not allowed ourselves to be exposed so that we can, after having been exposed, and sit down honestly with ourselves and say, this is what success could look like for me. That is some of the dangers. And so what we then do, we try to forge our purpose based on what is determined success for the church, but we do the same in society. And so, can the two be intertwined? Yes. But when we do that, let us do that in a healthy way. Let us expose ourselves as much as we can. Young people must live. Go out with your friends, dream, watch TV if that's what you enjoy, read books, and discover how different societies, how different groups in our world are defining success. Discover how people are choosing to be the odd ones out and yet defining for themselves what success is. Don't allow anyone else to define for you what success should be. Observe and define what success is for yourself. So for instance, as Bro Hloni Lepele, coming from a family where we are still trying to make it economically, perhaps success for me will be adding to the story of our family. But I must do that in a way that does not betray my purpose. I must do that in a way that does not betray what I have discerned to be a meaningful way of life. I must do that in a way that in which I have discerned what God has called me to live towards. And so for me, that's the important thing. And then lastly, Isa, just around this particular thing, is for me, what is also important as young people growing up in the church today, when we say we have been successful even in our contribution towards the church, for those of us who also express our purpose within the context of the church, we must allow ourselves to dream beyond the current chapter. So many of us idolize the next generation, so much so that we cannot dream outside of what they have done, outside of what they articulate well as the future of the church, aside of what they say the church should look like. We must challenge that. As young people, we should make the next generation's definition of success, or rather, we should make the next generation uncomfortable in how they define success, whether it's within the accounting field, whether it's within church, whether it's within the education sector. We must not hero worship so much so that even our lenses are limited to what our heroes, our idols, our role models define as success. But if anything, once we've defined success, it must never, or rather our purpose must never be betrayed by that. our purpose must always be what comes first, and then we define success for ourselves.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. We can close the session. We're done. The church is closed. I love.
Thank you.
Never our purpose, and I think defining that purpose goes into understanding who you are as a person. And for me personally, people never understood me when I said at the age of 25, if God would call me to ascend to the other side, I'll be happy because I had lived my purpose. I had lived in a way that was fulfilling for me, and I continue to do that. And it had nothing to do with the material gains of the world, which is I don't find off when other people do. But for me personally, I had lived my purpose and I continue to live it. So if God would say, "Be good, you've done your part," I would like everyone to say, Isa lived her purpose the best way she understood. So I think it's very important when we look in defining it within ourselves, and that then takes away the anxiety and pressure around it. I'm happy when my friends are driving the best cars in the world.
Ooh, Isa, you're lagging a bit on my end. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, Hloni. Don't tell me.
Can you hear?
I can hear you on my side. Hi, Hloni.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I'm back. I'm back. Sorry about that.
All right.
It was my network.
I think it's very important when we define success, because then comes my ideas. I've met a friend of mine in varsity, and he's my own pace, my own lane. And I've lived by that philosophy till today. And that allows me to say, no matter how much, that is my pace, that is my own lane. And if Hloni gets there earlier, it means he was driving on 160, and that was his pace, and I'm good with it. I'm happy with it. So I love the idea of defining on ourselves and the hierarchy of purpose, and then because then purpose defines what success is for you as a person, and it also comes in small parts. For example, now one of my ideas is to climb Kilimanjaro, that because of a certain purpose I want to find, and that when I do that, no matter how long it takes, that is my story, writing that story. Very much. I want you to say your last words, and then we close the session.
Sure, thank you, Isa. I think the first thing for me is that also it's important that as we discern our purpose, we also consider our family stories. I do think that adds a lot to our purpose. Consider your family stories, consider some of the stuff your family has been trying to undo, consider some of the things your family has been trying to build, and continue to build on that narrative. Purpose is always informed, or rather, how purpose works out is informed also by context. So look at where you are. Don't try I often say, personally, I believe, if Mandela had been born in USA for some odd reason, because I don't believe in predestination, his parents could have easily decided to move to the USA. Had they moved to the USA, perhaps his purpose would have been expressed within the context of the student revolution during your Stokely Carmichael's era, but it could have looked differently. Or had he moved to a first world country where there were no problems and had been brought up there, perhaps his purpose would have looked different. So there is always, so the problem is that a lot of us aspire to become a Mandela, even when our purpose, when our context does not require such. So always be honest in how you express your purpose. I always laugh, for instance, when I see, comrades who you see that this one in his head even his solutions. He's still living. He desires that he had been born in the Mkhonto Caesar era. They do not consider context. So do not betray your context. Your militancy, for instance, if you are into student politics, could look very different. You could be the one who's launching social media campaigns that drive petitions. You don't put a tire where it is not required. Don't put a tire in a road where only one car goes by. You don't even live in an economic hub, and here you are burning tires on the street simply because that's how you want to express your purpose. Don't do that. And so be honest to yourself, be honest to your context, be honest to your family story, but also be honest to who you are. And don't fear making mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as you discover your purpose. Before Moses, the figure Moses, could go to Israel and say to the Pharaoh, let my people go, he killed an Egyptian. And that was what resulted in him leaving to Midian. There were mistakes. There were errors in the process. It's totally okay. It's not the end of the world. You will be rejected at times. Oh, and then lastly, what I really want to say is that do not confuse affirmation and discernment, personal discernment. Your purpose is something you discover. And yes, as people around you, we affirm you. However, the affirmation is not the defining voice, because once that becomes the defining voice, it'll become the voice that easily breaks you. It is an affirmation and nothing more. But purpose is between you and your creator. And we affirm that which we can see playing itself out. We do not define it.
I do not like that you bring that point towards the end, because you make me touch this conversation around the whole issue of how we want to be politically correct. And
absolutely.
How
that's one for another day. I would love for us to do that one.
Yeah, how we want to be politically correct, and how that can actually betray our purpose.
100%.
Because we're doing things that would be applauded by other people. We're doing things that are political correct. We're doing things because we want to fit in. And in that process, deep down in our hearts, when we go to bed, we know we're not happy with those choices.
In actual fact, Isa, without entertaining this particular topic, because this is a topic on its own, I was quite, I don't want to say taken aback, but it was a point of interest for me to see how one protest is beginning to lose its volume. Fees Must Fall is no longer gaining the traction it used to gain, but the issue's still there. The issue of fees is still there. For me, I've always said, I don't care. People try to say the EFF protest was a success. It's fine. Let us please ourselves. Let us draw tattoos of our names on our foreheads. Great. But after the July unrest, I knew that people are not going to take a huge liking to the idea of a shutdown. I live in KZN now, and people are like, it's easy. We suffered after that. So we need to be creative. But that's a story for another day.
Definitely a story on another day around the political correctness. I think that's also a defining thing around as to what we define as success in our communities and what we define as our own purpose. And I think, just to touch one last thing, one of the things that I think are the yardstick of checking constantly where you are on your purpose is how you feel after doing the very thing you did. If you go and do a protest and a lot of people get arrested, and you knew deep down your heart that the whole thing was off, your heart will tell you. So the whole idea of popularity and affirmation is problematic. But anyway, Hloni, thank you very much for taking your time.
Thank you, guys.
I'm hopeful that more conversations will come out of this and will engage more as young people. To viewers at home, thank you for taking your time and listening to us all the whole time. The whole idea of this conversation was to begin a conversation. These are not definite answers. This is actually just to say there's a conversation we need to have with ourselves, our friends, with our at large, in redefining. We cannot continue to lose young people because they feel they're failures, they have not found their purpose, they're not being successful to an extent that they take their own lives because of pressures of society and because of the things that are happening around them that pushes them to a point where they feel, I have not done enough, I'm 30, I don't have a degree, I'm 30, I don't have a job, and all of those things. We need to create spaces that allow people to define their successes in whatever stage they're in, to define their purpose in whatever age they're in as a people, to be also receptive to our friends when they say, I'm 35 and I think going back to school is the best thing at this moment in order to find myself again, to be support systems that allow people to say, we can start again. Again, what Hloni is saying, starting afresh, taking a U-turn, making mistakes, are allowed in this journey because we're all just trying to make the best. From me, it's thank you very much for taking your time. Keep safe, keep having the conversation with friends. Be aware of people's struggles and where they are when you're having such conversation. Please tread carefully as they might trigger someone else. Thank you very much. Good night on my side. Bye.